I never imagined that the worst day of my life would become the moment that changed everything for the better. It sounds strange to say now, but sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to realize you were meant to rise. When I went through my divorce, when I uncovered the infidelity, when I found out there was another woman living the life I thought was mine, I truly believed it was over for me. I thought I had lost. I thought I would never stand again. But I was completely wrong. Back then, I had no idea I had stepped into one of the most important chapters of my life. The chapter where truth finally shows its face. The chapter where you learn who you really are, and who the other person never was. And no matter how much pain I felt, nothing compares to what happened when my story and his lies finally collided. Before we dive in, tell me something. What city are you watching from? I love knowing where these stories travel. And hey, if you can drop a like and subscribe, that helps me bring even more stories like this one. What I went through wasn't just a breakup. It was a shock. An emotional earthquake. And the worst part? Realizing that the person sleeping next to me was the same one tearing my world apart behind my back. People say the truth hurts, but lies destroy you. And I had to hit the very bottom to understand that some losses aren't losses at all. They're freedom in disguise. And that's what I want to show you today. How a betrayal that felt like the end became a powerful revelation. Not about me, but about him. How life placed me right in the middle of a moment that made my ex-husband turn pale during his own wedding, and how that moment flipped the entire story. So get ready, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a mirror, it's a warning, and most of all, it's proof that no one can hide the truth forever. From the moment she woke up that morning, something felt off, a heaviness in the air that she couldn't explain. It wasn't a loud warning or a dramatic moment. It was subtle, like a quiet pressure on her chest. A whisper she couldn't ignore. As she moved through the house, every corner felt strangely unfamiliar, as if the walls themselves were holding a secret. She couldn't shake the sense that her life was about to shift in a way she wasn't prepared for. And before I go on, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love seeing where these stories reach. And hey, if you're new here, hit the like button and subscribe. It truly helps me keep sharing stories like this. Her husband was acting differently. Not dramatically, but in those tiny ways that only someone who truly loves pays attention to. The way he avoided eye contact. The way his smile never reached his eyes anymore. The way he held his phone just a little too close to him, as if hiding the screen from the world. She tried to brush it off, telling herself she was overthinking. But the uneasy feeling stayed. The fear of betrayal was creeping into her mind, even though she desperately tried to push it away. Deep down, she sensed the shift long before she admitted it. His sudden late nights at work, the vague excuses, the distance growing between them, all of it pointed to something she didn't want to name. Each unanswered question added another crack to the foundation of their marriage. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust. But trust doesn't survive on hope alone. It needs presence. It needs honesty. And both had slowly begun slipping through her fingers. Still, she found herself trying harder than ever to make things feel normal again. She cooked his favorite meals, tried to start soft conversations, suggested small moments together, anything to bridge the growing gap. But the more she tried, the more distant he seemed. He wasn't just distracted. He was elsewhere, mentally, emotionally, maybe even physically. And in the quiet moments, when she allowed herself to truly feel, she knew what that kind of distance meant. She had seen it in other couples. She had heard friends describe it. It was the kind of distance that almost always ends with the revelation of an affair. Sometimes she'd catch him smelling like a perfume she didn't own. Sometimes he'd smile at his phone in a way he never smiled at her anymore. Little details that cut deeper every time. She'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince herself that she was just being insecure. After all, they had built a life together. They had weathered storms. Why would he risk everything now? But a heart that senses danger will always whisper the truth, even when the mind refuses to listen. And that day, the whisper became impossible to silence. She didn't know what was coming, but she could feel something approaching, something that would change everything she thought she knew about her marriage, her husband, and even herself. She didn't yet know that this was only the beginning, that soon, the truth behind the betrayal, the affair, and the unraveling of her divorce would burst into the open. But for now, all she had was the feeling, and that feeling was about to be confirmed in the most painful way imaginable. She always believed relationships don't break in a single moment. They crack slowly, piece by piece. And looking back, she realized the signs of betrayal had been right in front of her long before she admitted it. It started with silence. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that feels heavy, like someone is hiding a truth behind it. Whenever she asked how his day was, he answered with short, empty words. It felt like talking to someone who wasn't really there. And before I continue, tell me something real quick. What city are you watching from? I love knowing how far these stories travel. If you haven't yet, hit the like button and subscribe. It supports me more than you know. Then came the secrecy around his phone. Once upon a time, he would leave it anywhere. On the couch, the table, the counter. Now, it was practically glued to him. Always face down, always locked, always protected like a treasure. Notification sounds made him flinch. He'd step away to answer messages he claimed were nothing. She told herself not to jump to conclusions, but her intuition whispered louder each day. That kind of behavior wasn't normal. It was deliberate. It was the kind of change that almost always pointed to an affair. Soon, the schedule changes started. Late nights, last-minute meetings, work emergencies that didn't make sense, the vague explanations, the rehearsed tone, the way he reacted defensively whenever she asked simple questions. It didn't take an expert to sense the shift. It took a woman who had loved deeply and paid attention. She wasn't paranoid. She wasn't insecure. She was noticing what was right in front of her. But noticing hurts, and she wasn't ready to face the truth. Clothes started smelling different. A strange perfume, sweet, unfamiliar, clearly feminine, would linger on his shirts. His style changed too. Suddenly, he cared about tiny details he never cared about before. A new haircut, new cologne, new clothes. She tried to convince herself he was simply evolving, but deep down she knew. Men rarely reinvent themselves unless someone new is watching. The pieces were coming together, creating a picture she wasn't ready to see. Even so, she kept trying to rescue the connection, trying dinners together, small surprises, soft conversations, trying to reignite something that clearly only she was still holding on to. And every time he pulled away emotionally, a part of her wondered what she was doing wrong. It's heartbreaking how quickly betrayal twists the mind, turning love into self-doubt and trust into fear. But the responsibility was never hers. She didn't cause the distance. She didn't break the marriage. She didn't invite the affair into their home. What she didn't know was that the truth was coming, and it was coming fast. All the subtle hints, all the quiet alarms her heart had been sending, were about to be confirmed in a way she could never unsee. The signs she ignored would soon become undeniable proof. And once that proof appeared, nothing in her life would ever be the same. The truth never arrives gently. It doesn't knock. It crashes. And the moment she discovered the affair, it hit her with the force of a train. It happened unexpectedly. No snooping, no searching, no dramatic confrontation. He simply left his phone unlocked on the table, something he hadn't done in months. And at the exact moment she walked by, a message popped up. Intimate, explicit, impossible to misinterpret. Before we go deeper, tell me, what city are you watching from? I love seeing your comments. And if you haven't yet, hit like and subscribe. It really helps. She froze as she read the message. Her heart pounded so loudly she could feel it in her throat. The words on the screen weren't vague or confusing. They were clear as daylight, and cruel. They revealed not just infidelity, but emotional intimacy, shared jokes, plans, intentional deceit. Everything she feared was real. And in that moment, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stopped. Her whole body shut down, as if protecting her from fully absorbing the blow. When he realized she had seen the message, panic flashed across his face. He rushed toward her, reaching for the phone, stumbling over excuses he hadn't prepared. He tried to twist the truth, tried to minimize it, tried to erase what she had already read, but his words were empty. And she, standing there with the phone still vibrating in her hand, felt herself detach emotionally, as if watching the scene from outside her own body. The trust that held their marriage together dissolved in seconds. Suddenly, every strange detail from the past months made sense. The secretive texts, the late nights, the emotional distance, the perfume that didn't belong to her, the irritation whenever she asked simple questions. Every piece of the puzzle snapped into place, revealing a picture she had hoped was just imagination. But it wasn't insecurity. It wasn't paranoia. It was reality. Harsh, undeniable, and final. The affair wasn't a possibility. It was a fact. In the days that followed, she oscillated between heartbreak and clarity. Ice-cold clarity. She cried quietly at night, felt her chest tighten with every memory, but she also began to understand something important. The betrayal wasn't a reflection of her worth. It was a reflection of his character, his choices, his emptiness. The man she had loved for years wasn't who she thought he was. He wasn't honest, strong, or loyal. He was simply someone who chose the easier path, lying instead of loving, and that realization marked the true breaking point. There was no way back, no repair, no amount of apology could glue together what he had broken. What she found on that screen didn't destroy her marriage. It revealed that it had been destroyed long before she noticed. And now that the truth was exposed, there was only one direction left for her life to go: forward, toward the divorce, toward healing, and toward a version of herself she hadn't met yet, but would soon discover. The day she finally said the word divorce, something inside her broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet finality that was far more powerful. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply spoke the word with a calmness that startled even her. It was the calm of someone who had cried everything she could, who had carried disappointment for too long, and who no longer had the strength to pretend. And before I continue, tell me, what city are you watching from? I love connecting with you. And if you haven't already, hit like and subscribe. It means the world. He never expected it. People who betray rarely do. In his mind, he still controlled the narrative. He still believed he could decide when things ended, when they continued, and how she should feel. So when she said, "I want a divorce," he froze. First he laughed, thinking she wasn't serious. Then he tried to negotiate. Then he tried to guilt-trip her. But there was nothing left to negotiate. His words were empty. His apologies were recycled. His promises were meaningless. She had reached the point where enough becomes a survival instinct. As they began the painful process of separating their lives, she realized that the hardest part wasn't leaving him. It was letting go of the future she once imagined. Sorting through closets, old photos, memories tucked in drawers. It felt like packing away pieces of her own heart. Every box was a reminder of everything she fought for, and everything he casually threw away. The grief wasn't just over the marriage ending. It was over the version of herself she had abandoned trying to keep it alive. He, on the other hand, wavered between guilty affection and defensive anger. One moment he swore he would change, swore he would cut ties with the woman from the affair, swore he would fix everything. In the next, he accused her of giving up too soon, of not trying hard enough. The emotional manipulation was exhausting, a final attempt to shift the blame. But this time, she didn't absorb his guilt. She saw his tactics clearly, and clarity, once gained, cannot be undone. When the final papers were signed, she felt something she didn't expect: relief. Not the kind that comes instantly, like a weight being dropped. It was quieter, like the first breath after being underwater for too long. She realized the marriage hadn't ended that day. It had ended long before, on the day he chose betrayal over loyalty. The paperwork was just the last page of a story she had been forced to finish alone, but she wasn't prepared for what would come next. Because shortly after the divorce was finalized, news reached her. News that felt like a punch and a strange confirmation at the same time. He was planning to marry the woman from the affair. And not someday. Soon, very soon. And that revelation would open the door to the next chapter of her life, one she never saw coming. In the days following the divorce, she discovered a kind of silence she had never known before. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't comforting. It was the kind of silence that echoes inside you, expanding through every room of the house until everything feels too big, too quiet, too hollow. She would wake up and feel the absence of even the things she used to complain about. The sound of his keys tossed on the table, the half-finished coffee, the way he scrolled on his phone. The emptiness took up physical space. And before I keep going, tell me, what city are you watching from? I truly love reading your comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It really supports the channel. The first week was the hardest. She found herself checking her phone out of habit, expecting a message that would never come. Sometimes she even thought about reaching out, not because she wanted him back, but because she wasn't used to the quiet. That's one of the cruelest parts of betrayal. Even when you know someone hurt you, your heart still needs time to unlearn the routine. She was embarrassed to admit it, even to herself, but it hurt to know that while she was trying to rebuild her world, he was probably out there celebrating his new life with the woman from the affair. Nights were particularly long. She'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, her thoughts spinning in loops she couldn't break. Sometimes she cried silently, as if not making noise could lessen the pain. Other times she wandered through the house at 2 a.m., touching furniture, rearranging pillows, looking for pieces of herself she had lost. Loneliness has a strange weight, invisible but heavy, pressing down on you even when you're standing still. She felt it in her chest, her shoulders, her breath. What hurt wasn't just the separation. It was the grief of losing the life she once envisioned, the plans she made, the future she believed in. She questioned herself endlessly, wondering what she could have done differently. how she could have prevented the distance, the lies, the infidelity. But as the days passed, a different realization began to emerge. She hadn't failed. She hadn't caused the betrayal. She had simply loved someone who didn't know how to love her back. Slowly, something inside her began to shift. She started reclaiming small pieces of herself, her hobbies, her tastes, her morning rituals. She picked up books she had abandoned. She walked outside more. She cooked meals just for herself, rediscovering flavors she had forgotten she loved. It wasn't healing yet, but it was the beginning. A subtle shift, like a room being aired out after holding too much sorrow. And in the middle of that uncertain rebuilding, an unexpected clarity appeared. She was not broken. She was bruised, yes, deeply, but not broken. And day by day, she felt a tiny spark forming inside her. A spark she didn't fully understand yet. That spark would become strength, and she would need that strength, because the next thing she discovered would shake her world all over again. Her ex-husband wasn't just moving on, he was planning a wedding, with the woman who had shattered everything. As time passed, she realized she had to stand back up. Not for him, not to prove anything, but for herself. The first steps were small, almost hesitant, making her bed in the morning, opening the windows, letting sunlight fill the room. It's strange how such simple actions can feel so difficult after a divorce, but they were exactly what grounded her. Each tiny gesture reminded her she was still here, still breathing, still capable of starting again. And before I go on, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love knowing where you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying this story, hit like and subscribe. It really helps. She slowly returned to habits she had abandoned during the marriage. She drank her coffee without rushing. She took quiet morning walks. She played music he never liked and let it echo through the house. These little rituals, once unimportant, began creating space inside her. The wound from the betrayal was still there, but it no longer chained her. It no longer defined her. It simply existed, a scar forming quietly. Relearning how to enjoy her own company felt strange at first. She didn't fully know who she was outside of the relationship, but in that rediscovery, something beautiful started happening. She cooked meals just for herself and savored them. She lit candles at night. She danced in the living room without feeling judged. She took long showers and didn't feel guilty for taking her time. These small acts of self-care were victories, reminders that her life belonged to her again. She also explored new interests, signed up for classes, reconnected with a love for painting she didn't even know she had, started reading books about self-growth, strength, and healing. For the first time in years, her energy wasn't being drained by someone else's emotional chaos. It was being invested in herself, not to forget him or the affair, but because she deserved to take up space in her own life again. Of course, healing wasn't linear. There were days when memories hit her like waves, days when she imagined him with the other woman and felt her chest tighten, days when she wondered how someone she trusted so deeply could choose deceit so easily. But now, she had tools. She journaled. She went for long walks. She breathed through the pain instead of drowning in it. The ache didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling her. Little by little, she began to recognize herself again. Not the version shaped by the marriage, but the version underneath. Stronger, wiser, softer in some places, fiercer in others. And just as she began to feel a new chapter forming inside her, news arrived that rattled everything once more. Her ex wasn't just moving on. He wasn't just dating the woman from the affair. He was marrying her. And that revelation would open a door she never expected, leading to the chaos, confrontation, and truth that would soon unfold. She thought she had already faced the worst. She truly believed nothing else could hurt or surprise her after the divorce, after the betrayal, after watching her life fall apart piece by piece. But the universe has a way of testing people at the exact moment they start regaining strength. The news came abruptly. Her ex-husband was getting married. And not just to anyone, to the woman he had the affair with. Before we move on, tell me real quick, what city are you watching from? I love seeing your comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, take a second. It helps me bring more stories like this. The moment she saw the announcement, a post paired with a smiling photo of them together, her stomach dropped. Not because she wanted him back, but because the speed of it all felt like a slap. How could he move on so easily? How could he celebrate a relationship built on deceit? She stared at the screen, feeling that familiar tightness in her chest, the kind that comes when you're watching someone rewrite a story you lived, with themselves as the hero. What hurt most wasn't that he was with someone else. It was the way he framed the relationship as something pure, romantic, meant to be, as if it hadn't started with lies, as if her pain had been an inconvenient footnote. Social media comments were full of messages like, "True love wins," and "What a beautiful couple," and each one cut deeper because the truth was being dressed up as a fairy tale. She wasn't jealous. She was stunned by the shamelessness. She held the phone tightly, reading and rereading the post, trying to make sense of the emotional punch. The woman who once represented her greatest heartbreak now stood proudly next to him, celebrating a union born from disloyalty. And the strangest part, as painful as it was, she began noticing details others would miss. The forced smile, the tension hidden behind his eyes, the way the other woman clung to him a little too tightly. It wasn't happiness. It was performance. As the initial shock began to settle, something unexpected stirred inside her. Not sadness, not envy, but a sense of awakening, a realization. She understood, in that moment, that the man she once built a future with was incapable of genuine love or honesty. He hadn't changed. He simply changed the person he lied to. And witnessing that truth from a distance gave her a strange clarity. Their story was truly over, and she didn't want any part of the version he was creating next. But fate wasn't done with her yet, because soon after the announcement, when she thought she had processed everything, something else arrived. Something that would shake her even deeper. A beautiful, gold-trimmed envelope with her name handwritten across it. A wedding invitation. And this single, unbelievable gesture would pull her into a chapter she never imagined. A chapter where truths explode, masks fall, and her ex-husband's perfect facade finally cracks. Just when she thought nothing else could surprise her, the universe delivered something so absurd it felt almost surreal. A gold-trimmed envelope arrived in her mailbox. Elegant, heavy, and personal. Her name was handwritten in calligraphy across the front. She opened it slowly, unsure of what to expect. And the moment she saw the contents, her breath caught. It was a wedding invitation. To her ex-husband's wedding. To the woman he had the affair with. Before diving deeper, tell me, what city are you watching from? I love knowing where you're joining from. And hey, if you're enjoying this story, drop a like and subscribe. It truly helps me keep going. She read the invitation more than once, as if repeating it would somehow make it make sense. The script was elegant, the paper thick, the message carefully curated. Join us to celebrate a love that overcame all obstacles, it read. The irony was so sharp she almost laughed. What obstacles? The lines of loyalty they crossed, the vows they shattered, the marriage they destroyed. It felt like the entire thing was written in some alternate reality where betrayal was romantic instead of cruel. The shock was overwhelming, not because she wanted him back. That chapter was closed. But because of the boldness, the disrespect, the audacity. Who invites their ex-wife to the wedding that was born out of the ashes of a divorce and an affair? She wondered if it was his idea or the other woman's. Was it an attempt at closure, a twisted form of bragging, a display of false maturity, or worse, a way to prove something to themselves? As she sat there holding the invitation, she thought about their entire history, every sacrifice, every moment she tried to save a marriage he had already abandoned emotionally. And now, here she was, being asked to attend the celebration of the very betrayal that destroyed it. A bitter taste filled her mouth. She could feel the humiliation that the old version of her would have swallowed quietly. But now she was different. She had changed. For several long minutes, she did nothing but stare at the gold lettering, and while she didn't know why, she didn't throw it away. Something held her still. Maybe curiosity, maybe closure, maybe intuition. The invitation wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a doorway into something she couldn't yet name but could feel approaching. Something big, something heavy, something inevitable. So she placed the invitation on the table. And right then, a strange, cold awareness washed over her. This wedding wouldn't be ordinary. It wouldn't be peaceful. And it certainly wouldn't end the way they imagined. She didn't know exactly what would happen, but she felt it. The truth was coming. And when it arrived, it would shake the ground beneath everyone involved. The day of the wedding arrived faster than she expected, and as she walked toward the venue, a cold shiver ran down her spine. It wasn't fear, it wasn't anger, it was something deeper, the awareness that she was about to stand face to face with the aftermath of her betrayal. Her footsteps were steady, even though her heart pounded. She paused before entering, catching her reflection in the glass doors. She didn't see a broken woman anymore. She saw someone who had survived hell and still found the strength to show up. Before I go on, tell me, what city are you watching from? I love hearing from you. And if you're enjoying this, tap like and subscribe. It really helps. The moment she stepped inside, every whisper died. Heads turned, eyes widened. Some people pretended not to stare, while others didn't bother hiding their shock. After all, it wasn't every day that an ex-wife walked into a wedding born from an affair. She walked with quiet dignity, not trying to shrink, not trying to stand out either, just existing. And somehow, her presence alone was enough to shift the energy of the entire room. The venue was decorated beautifully. Soft lights, elegant flowers, carefully chosen music. But beneath the perfection, an unspoken tension pulsed through the air. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some offered sympathetic nods. Others quickly looked away, unsure which side they belonged on. Everyone knew how this marriage had started. They just pretended not to. But her presence made the truth impossible to ignore. She found a seat near the back, hoping to blend in, but blending in was impossible. She was the storm cloud floating in a sky painted to look perfect. And the surprising thing? She didn't feel ashamed. Not anymore. As she watched the guests, she noticed how forced their smiles were, how stiff their conversations sounded. This wasn't a celebration. It was a performance, and she was no longer part of the act. Then, from across the room, she saw him, her ex-husband. He wore an expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, his expression carefully rehearsed. But the moment he saw her, everything faltered. His shoulders tensed, his jaw tightened, his smile, the one meant for photos, faded for a split second. That second revealed everything. He wasn't confident, he wasn't proud, he was unsettled, and she felt it. Sitting there, surrounded by people who didn't know where to place their eyes, she sensed something stirring beneath the surface of the event, something fragile, unstable. The air felt charged, like a storm waiting to break, and she didn't know yet. But this was only the beginning. The truth, the chaos, the humiliation that would soon unfold, it all started in that exact moment when she walked through those doors. As the ceremony preparations continued, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier. Her ex-husband walked around greeting guests with a confidence that clearly didn't belong to him. It was forced, the kind of arrogance people wear when they're trying to hide fear. Every smile was stiff, every handshake too firm, every laugh timed a little too perfectly. The entire performance felt unnatural, like he was terrified someone might see through the cracks. And before I continue, tell me, what city are you watching from? I love reading your comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. The guests noticed. Even if they pretended not to, they saw it. Some whispered quietly, others exchanged glances that said what no one dared speak aloud. This wedding didn't feel right. There was no warmth in the room, no genuine joy, just tension wrapped in fancy decor. The flowers were beautiful, the lights carefully arranged, the music soft and elegant, but something beneath it all felt off, like everyone was trying too hard to believe the love story being sold to them. His fiancée, the woman from the affair, moved around with an air of triumph, but even her confidence looked fragile. She clung to his arm every chance she got, as if grounding him, or maybe grounding herself. Her smile was wide but tight, and her eyes darted quickly from face to face, scanning for judgment. And there was plenty. Even if nobody said anything outright, the air was thick with silent opinions. It was impossible to hide a relationship built on betrayal when the entire room knew how it started. From her seat, the ex-wife observed everything quietly. She didn't feel jealous or bitter or angry. Not anymore. She felt strangely detached, almost like she was watching a movie she'd already seen the ending of. The version of him she once loved was long gone, replaced by a man who cared more about appearances than truth. And watching him play the role of happy groom, she felt a mix of pity and clarity. Pity for the performance, clarity about the person he truly was. Then something shifted. He caught her eye from across the room, and his expression faltered, just for a moment. His arrogance slipped, his posture tightened, his eyes widened in that instinctive way people react when confronted with their own history. It was only a second, but it said everything. Her presence reminded him of the truth he'd been desperately trying to bury. It reminded him of the promises he broke, the lies he told, the woman he betrayed. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than anything she could have spoken. Around them, the tension grew sharper. Guests sensed the unease but didn't know the cause. Conversations became shorter, laughter more forced, and even the music seemed to lose its charm. It was as if the entire wedding was balancing on a thin thread, and her arrival had made it tremble. She didn't know it yet, but the unraveling had already begun. The truth would soon tear through that room like lightning, and the wedding they tried so hard to perfect would transform into something unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. It happened so fast that most guests didn't even notice at first. A man, a distant acquaintance of the groom, slightly drunk and far too comfortable, stood up with his glass raised high. His voice carried across the room louder than he intended, slicing through conversations. "To the groom," he said, wobbling slightly. "A man who finally got to marry the woman he really wanted, even back when he was still married the first time." A shocked silence spread through the room. "And before I take you deeper into this moment, tell me real quick, what city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe." The words echoed like a slap. People froze. Eyes darted from the guest to the groom, then to the bride, then to the ex-wife sitting quietly near the back of the room. Whispers erupted almost instantly, spreading like wildfire. The groom's face turned red, then white, then something in between. He tried to force a laugh, tried to wave it off as a joke, but it was too late. The truth, wrapped in careless humor, had already been released. You can't unring a bell. And you certainly can't unhear a confession about an affair. The bride's smile dropped. Her grip on her bouquet tightened. She turned slowly toward her fiancé, her eyes sharp and full of questions. The kind of questions she never expected to ask on her wedding day. The kind of questions that demand answers he wasn't prepared to give. She whispered something harsh under her breath, and he shook his head quickly, insisting it wasn't like that. But the room had shifted. It was undeniable. The elegant wedding had taken on the atmosphere of a courtroom. From her seat, the ex-wife felt the tension wrap around her like smoke. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't celebrating the chaos. She was simply stunned. She watched the scene unfold with a kind of emotional distance she didn't know she was capable of. The man she once cried for, fought for, begged for clarity from, now stood exposed in front of everyone. His lies weren't hers to carry anymore. They were finally on his shoulders. The drunk guest, oblivious to the destruction he had unleashed, kept talking. "Come on," he continued, laughing. "Everybody knows they were together way before the divorce. It's not like it was a secret." Another wave of gasps filled the room. His words struck harder this time, because now they weren't just rumors. They were being spoken aloud, boldly, publicly, without hesitation. The bride's face drained of color. The groom looked as though the floor might open beneath him. And that moment, that single, reckless toast, was the spark that ignited everything that would come next. The guests didn't know it yet, but they had just witnessed the first crack in the facade, a crack that would rip open wider and wider until the entire truth came spilling out, merciless and unstoppable. The groom's mask had slipped, and soon, it would fully shatter. After the disastrous toast, the wedding hall fell into that uncomfortable silence that feels almost alive, heavy, thick, waiting. Everyone sensed something else was coming, something bigger. The groom tried to laugh it off, tried to compose himself, but the panic beneath his smile was obvious. The bride stood stiff beside him, her expression carved out of anger and confusion. "Before we dive deeper, tell me, what city are you watching from? I love reading your comments. And if you haven't yet, hit like and subscribe. It helps me bring more stories like this." Then, another guest stood up. This time, it wasn't a drunk troublemaker. It was someone sober, someone calm, someone who knew the groom far too well. His longtime friend, the one who had been around before the divorce, before the cracks, before the lies began piling up. The room turned toward him as he walked slowly to the center, requesting the microphone with a steady hand. He didn't smile, he didn't toast. He simply cleared his throat and said, "I think it's time people hear the full story." A murmur swept through the guests. The groom stiffened, the bride's eyes narrowed. The ex-wife felt her heartbeat quicken, not out of hope, but out of recognition. This was the moment the truth had been waiting for. The friend continued, voice steady. "I watched this relationship start long before anyone admitted it, long before the affair was exposed, long before the marriage ended." Gasps rippled through the hall. The groom swallowed hard, color draining from his face. He knew exactly where this was going. "And," the friend added slowly, "you didn't just lie to your wife. You didn't just betray your marriage. You also lied to her." He pointed gently toward the bride, the former mistress. The room held its breath. Then, after a dramatic pause, he delivered the blow that shattered the groom's facade entirely. "Because while you were seeing her, you were seeing someone else too." The hall erupted in stunned reactions. Some guests covered their mouths. Others whispered loudly, no longer concerned about hiding their shock. The bride stepped back as if she had been physically struck, her eyes flooded with disbelief, her breath shaking. Meanwhile, the groom's face turned ghost pale, drained of every drop of confidence, arrogance, and control. The truth had finally hit him like a tidal wave. And the ex-wife? She sat silently, absorbing the moment. not with satisfaction or vengeance, but with a quiet clarity that felt strangely comforting, because now, everyone saw who he really was. The truth wasn't her burden anymore. It was his. And as the whispers grew louder and the atmosphere tightened, she sensed something even bigger was coming. The wedding wasn't just cracking, it was about to collapse completely. The moment the truth came out, the entire room seemed to shift. It was as if the air thickened, as if every guest collectively realized they were no longer attending a wedding. They were witnessing a downfall. The groom stood frozen, pale and trembling, unable to form a single coherent word. His bride, the former mistress, stared at him with a fury that could cut glass. And just before I go on, tell me real quick, what city are you watching from? I love knowing where these stories reach. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it would mean a lot if you did. It really supports the channel. Whispers erupted everywhere. Guests leaned toward each other, stunned, exchanging theories, judgments, and disbelief. Some stood from their seats to get a better look. Others chose to walk away, uncomfortable with the raw tension unraveling in front of them. The bride grabbed the groom's arm so tightly he winced, demanding answers he didn't have. She had come into this wedding believing she had won. Now, she realized she had never been special. She had just been one of many. "What is he talking about?" she hissed, her voice trembling. He stuttered, tried to deny it, tried to twist the narrative into something less humiliating. But nothing he said sounded believable. His voice shook, his excuses contradicted each other, and with every passing second, it became painfully clear. He wasn't just guilty, he was exposed. His facade, the polished groom, the devoted partner, the man trying to move on gracefully after the divorce, shattered under the weight of the truth. Some guests attempted to intervene, to calm the situation, but their attempts were useless. The chaos had already taken over. People began recording discreetly, capturing the unraveling moment the groom's double life was dragged into the light. Even those who tried to avoid looking couldn't help it. It was human nature. Nobody can look away from a collapse happening in real time. And this wasn't just any collapse. This was the collapse of a man who built his life on deception. From the back of the room, the ex-wife watched everything unfold with a quiet calm. Not joy, not revenge, just clarity. The man she once loved was now standing in front of everyone as the person he truly was, not the version he pretended to be. She realized in that moment that she hadn't lost anything the day their marriage ended. She had been released, freed from a future with someone who didn't know loyalty, honesty, or love. The bride, shaking with rage and humiliation, finally turned on him fully. "You lied to me too," she spat. "You promised I was different. You swore you never cheated on me." Her voice cracked as she spoke the last word. He reached for her, but she recoiled as if his touch burned. The tension in the room snapped like a wire stretched too tight. The groom opened his mouth to defend himself again. But before he could speak, another voice from the crowd rose, a voice that would reveal something even more devastating than what had already been said. The bride, the former mistress, was no longer holding back. Her anger erupted with the force of years of insecurity crashing down at once. She stepped toward the groom with fire in her eyes, her voice trembling not from fear but from pure rage. What she once believed was a romantic victory was now dissolving in front of everyone. And before I go deeper into this moment, tell me, what city are you watching from? I genuinely love seeing your responses. And if you haven't yet, hit like and subscribe. It makes a huge difference. "You told me she was the problem," the bride shouted, pointing toward the ex-wife in the back of the room. "You told me the divorce was happening because she was distant, cold, because she didn't value you." Her voice cracked, but the whole time, it was you. Her accusations rang through the hall like a siren. Guests stared, some in shock, others with a sense of uncomfortable satisfaction. She wasn't just angry, she was humiliated. And humiliation has a way of tearing the mask off faster than anything else. The groom tried to reach for her, tried to whisper explanations that made no sense, but she didn't let him speak. "You told me I was special," she continued, shaking her head. "You told me we had something real. You said I was different." Her voice lowered, but the bitterness stayed sharp. "But now I see it. I was just another lie you told to feel powerful." Silence fell. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that swallows the room whole. She turned to the guests, tears brimming in her eyes but refusing to fall. "Did any of you know?" she demanded. "Did anyone know he was cheating on me too?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Heads turned away. Some nodded awkwardly, others remained still. The weight of collective guilt, or silence, pressed over the room. The ex-wife watched all of this, her heart unexpectedly heavy for the woman who once played a role in her pain. Betrayal didn't discriminate. It had devoured them both. Finally, the bride spun back toward the groom. "You don't deserve anyone," she whispered harshly. And then, in front of everyone, she shoved him, not hard enough to injure him, but hard enough to send him stumbling back, hard enough to shatter whatever dignity he had left. Gasps filled the hall. The groom's facade collapsed completely. No confidence, no control. Just a man exposed in front of the world he tried so hard to impress. And yet, the chaos wasn't done, because her rage was only the beginning. Beneath the surface, something far more explosive was building. Accusations, revelations, and truths that had been buried for far too long. What started as humiliation was about to spiral into full destruction, dragging every lie into the open. And soon, the wedding would become something no one there would ever forget. The moment she pushed him, the entire wedding seemed to collapse into chaos. Conversations stopped abruptly. Glasses clinked nervously. A ripple of shock spread across the hall. It was the kind of moment where time felt suspended, where everyone sensed something irreversible had begun. The groom, flushed and shaken, tried to stand tall again, but the room no longer respected him. His arrogance evaporated. His confidence vanished. And before I continue, let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? And if you haven't yet, hit like and subscribe. It truly helps. The bride, once proud, once triumphant, now looked unrecognizable. Anger and disbelief twisted her expression, and her hands shook violently as she pointed at him. "You lied to me, just like you lied to her," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You never loved either of us." The guests gasped, murmuring among themselves, unable to decide whether they should intervene or keep watching the spectacle unfold. It was like witnessing a fire start in slow motion, knowing it would soon consume everything. The groom tried to salvage what was left of his dignity. "It wasn't like that," he insisted weakly, but his voice was trembling, barely audible. No one believed him, not after everything that had already been revealed. Some guests shook their heads, disappointed. Others whispered that they had always suspected something was off. And the worst part? They weren't wrong. His polished image, the devoted fiancé, the man starting a new life after the divorce, was nothing but a carefully crafted illusion now falling apart piece by piece. Meanwhile, the bride began to unravel further. Her accusations grew louder, sharper, each one landing like a blow. "You made me feel like I was chosen," she cried, "but I was just convenient. And while I was destroying myself for you, you were out there with someone else." The words echoed through the hall, raw and painful. The groom lowered his head, his face drained of color. He couldn't hide anymore. Not from her, not from the guests, not from the truth. From her seat, the ex-wife watched with a strange mix of sadness, clarity, and detachment. It was surreal to see the man who once held her heart now crumble under the weight of his own lies. She wasn't happy about it. She wasn't proud. She simply understood now, deeply, that she had escaped something far more destructive than loneliness. What she had called heartbreak back then was, in reality, liberation. Watching the destruction unfold confirmed something she had suspected for months. The truth always finds a way out, and just when everyone thought the worst had already happened, the atmosphere shifted again. A new voice rose from the crowd, firm, steady, dangerously calm. Someone else had something to say. Another secret, another revelation, and this one would strike even deeper than the last. Because the groom wasn't the only one hiding something, and what was about to be revealed would push the wedding over the edge, turning disaster into absolute collapse. As the chaos in the wedding hall intensified behind her, she realized it was time to leave. Not because she felt uncomfortable or threatened, but because she finally understood that none of it belonged to her anymore. The shouting, the humiliation, the unraveling, it was all the consequence of choices she didn't make. She had come far enough, so, with calm steps, she rose from her seat. "Before I continue, tell me, what city are you watching from? I love seeing your comments. And if you're still here with me, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps." Walking between the tables, she felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years. Every step she took away from that hall felt like reclaiming a part of herself she thought she had lost during the divorce. Guests watched her go, some with guilt, some with curiosity, others with quiet admiration, but she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The weight she had carried for so long was finally slipping off her shoulders, fading into the distance behind her. As she reached the lobby, the screams and accusations from inside the hall echoed faintly through the walls. Yet none of it stirred pain in her anymore. Not the bride's rage, not the groom's denial, not the collapse of the relationship that began with an affair. She realized something profound in that moment. She no longer felt threatened by the other woman. For so long, the mistress had represented everything she had lost. But now, she saw her through new eyes, as another victim of the same man's lies. And that realization softened something inside her. Stepping outside, she breathed in the cold evening air, crisp, refreshing, honest. It washed over her like a reset button. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a sense of peace settle deep in her chest. Not joy, not triumph, peace. A quiet, steady understanding that the universe had just shown her, in the most dramatic way possible, exactly what she had escaped. The betrayal that once crushed her was now the thing setting her free. Reaching her car, she hesitated before getting in, allowing herself one final moment of reflection. She thought about the nights she cried, the mornings she woke up feeling hollow, the doubt she carried, the pieces of herself she tried desperately to hold together. And now, as she stood in the soft glow of the parking lights, she felt none of those things. Only clarity, only relief, only the undeniable truth that she was finally stepping into a chapter meant only for her. As she drove away, the wedding venue lights faded in her rearview mirror. The chaos, the shouting, the collapse, all of it behind her now. The road ahead was quiet, calm, and open. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt excitement for the future. She didn't know exactly what was coming next, but she could feel something new forming inside her. A beginning, a turning point, a promise that her story was far from over. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable began happening. Her life slowly, quietly started to bloom again. It didn't happen overnight. It happened in small ways. Gentle shifts she barely noticed at first. She started waking up without the weight on her chest. She started breathing a little easier. That heavy grief tied to the betrayal loosened its grip, making room for something she hadn't felt in a long time, possibility. And before I keep going, tell me, what city are you watching from? I love knowing how far these stories reach. And if you're enjoying this, hit like and subscribe. It means so much. She rebuilt her days from the ground up. It started with simple routines, making coffee in silence, letting the morning sun touch her face, taking slow walks that cleared her mind. Then came the bigger shifts. She began studying again, exploring subjects she had abandoned years before. She rediscovered her love for reading, music, films, pieces of herself that had been pushed aside during the emotional storm of the divorce. Every new discovery felt like reclaiming something she didn't even know she had lost. Little by little, her confidence returned. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It grew quietly, like a seed finally getting light after being buried for too long. She looked in the mirror differently, not searching for flaws or comparing herself to the woman from the affair, but recognizing the strength in her own reflection. She began to see herself not through the lens of betrayal, but through the lens of survival. Pain had reshaped her, but it hadn't ruined her. It had revealed her. She reconnected with people who mattered, friends she hadn't seen in months, family members who had watched her dim slowly. She let them back in, shared laughter again, shared meals, shared pieces of her healing. These connections reminded her that love wasn't meant to hurt, to manipulate, or to diminish. Real love, the kind that builds rather than destroys, existed in the small moments, in genuine conversations, in people who had been there all along. Her career followed the same path. With her emotional space finally free from constant tension, she started performing better at work. Her ideas flowed with ease. Her creativity returned. People noticed her energy shift before she did. She wasn't weighed down anymore. She had room to grow. She had room to imagine a future that wasn't shaped by someone else's dishonesty. The woman she was becoming felt more grounded, more confident, more her. And somewhere along this journey of rebuilding and rediscovering, she felt something extraordinary, pride, not because everything was perfect, but because she had survived what was meant to break her. The betrayal, the divorce, the chaos. None of it defined her. What defined her was the way she rose afterward. And without realizing it, she was approaching the deepest reflection of her entire journey, the moment she finally understood who she had become because of everything she endured. As more time passed, she realized that the biggest transformation wasn't in her routine, her career, or even her relationships. It was inside her. The betrayal, the very thing that once shattered her, had become a mirror. A painful mirror, yes, but one that showed her exactly who she was beneath everything she had endured. She no longer saw herself as someone abandoned or broken. She saw someone rebuilt, someone wiser, someone stronger. Before I continue, let me know. What city are you watching from? And if this story has resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. It truly helps. She began to understand that the divorce wasn't a failure. It was an escape, a necessary ending to a narrative that was suffocating her spirit. For so long, she had believed that leaving meant she hadn't tried hard enough. But now, with clarity, she saw the truth. Staying would have been the real failure. Staying would have meant abandoning herself. The pain she carried wasn't a sign of weakness. It was proof that she had loved deeply, honestly, and fully. And that kind of love is never something to be ashamed of. The woman from the affair, once a symbol of everything she'd lost, now represented something else, perspective. She realized the mistress hadn't won anything. She had simply stepped into a life built on lies, a foundation that was always destined to crumble. And suddenly the ex-wife felt compassion rather than bitterness. They had both been betrayed, both misled, both promised a version of him that never truly existed. Betrayal doesn't favor one woman. It consumes them all. With that newfound understanding, she found herself reflecting on the real lesson hidden in all the pain, that losing someone who can lie so easily is not a loss. It's a rescue, a redirection, a divine interruption. She realized that the marriage hadn't ended when the papers were signed. It had ended the moment he chose deceit over sincerity, and once someone chooses that path, their downfall becomes inevitable. She had simply stepped out of the collapse before it buried her too. Slowly, she began to see herself as the protagonist of her life again. Not the victim, not the abandoned wife, not the woman left for someone else, but the woman who survived, who evolved, who walked through fire and came out on the other side with her heart still open. She realized that the most powerful transformation a person can go through is the one forced by heartbreak, because heartbreak strips away illusion. It forces you to meet yourself honestly. And in the end, her reflection was simple but life-changing. Betrayal didn't reveal her worth. It revealed his character. And once she understood that, everything shifted. The pain lost its sharpness. The memories lost their grip. And the future finally felt like hers again. She was ready to step into a new chapter not shaped by lies, fear, or the actions of someone who never deserved her. A chapter built by her own hands, guided by the strength she discovered in the darkest moments of her life.